Welcome to our presentation concerning hiring for mission in Catholic schools. My name is Dr. Rita Hess.
And I'm Dr. Grover Green.
I'm Dr. Ivan Earls. Today we are presenting Hiring for Mission in Catholic Schools, a research project we did with St. Louis University. It is a study of hiring for mission in Catholic schools via self-described hiring practices of administrators. What we are going to do for you guys today is we're going to just explain a little bit of the research we conducted in the role of mission and hiring, a little review of the literature regarding mission and hiring. We're going to examine some of the results of a survey that we administered to Catholic school administrators, and then we'll discuss a little bit of the implications and conclusions. So now I'll hand it over to Dr. Green.
Thank you, Dr. Earls. As Dr. Earls said, we're going to start with our foundational knowledge. So we're going to give you a good basis for why we even conducted the research in the first place by looking at this principle of hiring for mission, what that means in the general scope of organizational success, as well as what that means in terms of Catholic schools. To start with, before we launch into Catholic schools and talk about applying this principle to Catholic schools, hiring for mission, let's look at mission-driven organizations in general. I cite here Bennis from the Bullman and Deal, well-known researchers in organizational success. He says, quoted by Bullman and Deal, "All great groups believe that they are on a mission from God, that they could change the world, make a dent in the universe. They are obsessed with their work. It becomes not a job, but a fervent quest. That belief is what brings the necessary cohesion and energy to their work," right? So like a little bit of Blues Brothers here on a mission from God. Every organization believes in their mission and believes they can change the world. And of course, what's great about Catholic schools is we actually are on a mission from God. Here's a diagram we created to help summarize all of our research in one infographic to help understand what this hiring for mission principle means for Catholic schools, right? So I'll walk you through it briefly here, and then we'll look at some more of the research in terms of hiring for mission in organizations. It starts off with Catholic schools at the heart of the church's mission, which comes from Matthew 28, right? The Great Commission, famously, where Jesus Christ says to his apostles before he ascends, "Go into the world baptizing, right, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit," right? All the nations of the world. This commission is handed down into the church through all its institutions, right? And in terms of education, that starts in the family with parental consent, Canon 868, right? And delineates itself through all aspects of the church through the universal call of holiness made famous through Vatican II. And so what this means is parents partner with schools to hand on this mission, right, to their children. And what this means for schools is that to hire individuals who understand and embody this mission in their vocation as educators. And this falls to administrators because they're the main hiring agents, right? They're the ones who typically in Catholic schools are the ones vetting and hiring, recruiting teachers. So they choose teachers that hopefully prioritize the standards that the church has handed down in terms of the evangelizing mission of the church, connected with that universal call to holiness, which is connected with the vocation of teaching. And parents, in a sense, collaborate with the faculty and staff of the school that they're entrusting their children to. And through the power of the Holy Spirit and through the gifts of those educators and those parents, hopefully those students are transformed to then go out and actually exercise and execute that Matthew 28 commission, right? Going and making disciples of all nations in their own lives. As a great summary, Miller in his great little brown book, The Holy See's Teaching on Catholic Schools, says, "The specific purpose of a Catholic education is the formation of boys and girls who will be good citizens of this world, enriching society with the leaven of the gospel, but who will also be citizens of the world to come. Catholic schools have a straightforward goal: to foster the growth of good Catholic human beings who love God and neighbor and thus fulfill their destiny to become saints." Right? Can't think of a higher goal or greater goal in terms of educational objectives than that. But that, nonetheless, is the very lofty and literally transcendent goal that Catholic schools have before them for every single human being who walks into their midst and is charged with educating. In terms of mission of Catholic schools, and I'm going to get into organizational mission and what that has to do with hiring, but I'm just going to stop for a moment and introduce the concept of mission in Catholic schools to then set up what it means to hire according to mission. So We did a lot of research, but I picked out, I think, one of our most powerful examples of our research and what the church teaches us about the mission of Catholic schools. Pope Benedict XVI, Emeritus, said, Catholic school is an especially powerful instrument of hope. And his predecessor, St. Pope Paul VI, said, a Catholic school leads its students to promote efficaciously the good of the earthly city and also prepares them for service in the spread of the kingdom of God, so that by leading an exemplary apostolic life, they become, as it were, a saving leaven in human community, right? This is a common theme in terms of mission of Catholic schools. Going out, kind of like the Mass, Misa, right? Leaving, going forth from Catholic schools to transform society. Jacobs, who was a major influence in our research, expounds about Catholic schools. Every educational activity discovers its authentic referent in the theological vision of the human person as God's creature. Students take courses not merely for knowledge or skills or interest that convey and they stimulate students, but they take courses as a means to discover their true identity as children of God, become more godlike in and through their human existence. So what the theological term being theosis, becoming like God, right? Jesus Christ became man, God became man, so that man could become like him. So there's deep theology that should be considered in terms of when we're thinking about what Catholic schools are supposed to be doing. Right, we can't get away from the deep, beautiful, profound, sublime theology that lays the foundation of Catholic schools and our mission. Pope John Paul II, continuing this, said, St. Pope John Paul II says, the greatest contribution that authentically Catholic education can make to American culture is to restore that culture, that conviction that human beings can grasp the truth of things. And in grasping the truth, can know their duties to God, to themselves, and their neighbors. And following up that, he reminds us, the contemporary world urgently needs the service of educational institutions that uphold and teach that truth, that fundamental value without which freedom, justice, and human dignity are extinguished. So we're Catholic schools, right? We are schools. So that means we do deal in knowledge and in truth. And of course, that truth is informed by divine revelation and can be incredibly important for helping to restore and be a salve to our broken culture in many ways, through freedom, justice, and human dignity, as John Paul II beautifully puts it. Finally, the church teaches, as this kind of a summative assessment here of the Commission of Catholic Schools, the Congregation of Catholic Education in 1977 famously says of what Catholic schools do and why they exist. Christ is the foundation of the whole educational enterprise in Catholic school. His revelation gives new meaning to life and helps man to direct his thought, action, and will according to the gospel, making the Beatitudes his norm of life. The fact, in their own individual ways, all members of the school community share this Christian vision. It's what makes the school Catholic. Principles of the gospel in this manner become the educational norms, since the school then has them as its internal motivation and final goal. Okay, so I think the mission of Catholic education is clear. What I want to do now is transition and talk about hiring for mission as a general principle connected to organizational success, not necessarily in Catholic schools, but in secular organizations and in organizational success broadly. Jim Collins, most famously in his Good to Great and his follow-up Good to Great in the social sector, famously asserted that for organizations to be successful, to meet their mission, the first thing they need to do is get the wrong people off the bus, the right people on the bus, and the right people in the right seats. This was a phrase that my team used constantly, consistently throughout our research over and over again and returned to as a really good foundational principle when we're thinking about this concept of hiring for mission. And he continues, motivating employees to do better is a waste of time, as the right people are capable of motivating themselves. And when you have the right people, they will require little motivation or management, as they will work towards creating results on their own. So it's the who question rather than the what question. That's what he says here, right? Their guiding principle is to first determine the who before determining the what. That's what organizations should set out to do when they're trying to build a successful organization that is mission and vision focused. Furthermore, Simon Sinek, famous leadership guru, follows Collins by saying, you don't hire for skills, you hire for attitude. You can always teach the skills. And what's interesting is in some of our research, that actually comes out amongst there's some responses that were given by some of the principals. I had one principal tell us, I remember, that they would much rather hire someone who is solidly on board with the mission and vision of Catholic education and understands that in their being and the way they live, who maybe not as experienced as another candidate, right? Because you can give the experience, you can help with the skills, coaching up the teaching, it's the attitude, it's the buy-in that is difficult to teach. So that definitely came through in our research. Similarly, great companies don't hire skilled people and motivate them. They hire already motivated people and inspire them. I think this definitely resonates with our research into Catholic schools. In schools, though, it can be difficult to motivate faculty around a unified mission and vision because of over-compartmentalization. Everyone's in their own safe compartment. As long as they don't touch one another and they stay safe within that compartment, they can kind of do their own thing. But that's not really how organizations are successful. They're successful by everyone working together towards the same mission. And when they do that, we know that success can come for that organization. In terms of mission success, that does ultimately fall on the teachers. They're the ones executing on the mission every day. And we know from a great amount of research the impact a great teacher can have on the classroom and on the lives of their students, right? Marzano makes it clear, right? So we know that effective teachers enhance student achievement. Impressive findings from a wide variety of researchers attest to this fact. And that classroom teachers are probably the single most influential factor in a student's achievement. Whitaker says very similar thing, right? Get better teachers or improve the teachers you already have are typically the options an organization like a school has to fulfill their mission and vision. Finally, Tucker and Strong also say studies have substantiated that a whole range of personal and professional qualities are associated with higher levels of student achievement. That comes through the teachers. How does this translate to Catholic schools? Well, it translates to Catholic schools because, well, likewise, like any other school, the greatest asset a Catholic school has are the teachers. But in Catholic schools, there's even greater expectations, but even also greater resources, right? We believe that being a Catholic school teacher is a vocation. And as St. John Bosco says here, right, is truly a holy act, a good deed, a holy thing, right? And even among the holiest of deeds that can be done in this life is to be a teacher. In those terms, hiring for mission is crucial for Catholic schools because Catholic schools expect an extra level from their teachers, right? And I'm going to lay that out here. And this is connected, as I said, with the mission. Education is not given for the purpose of gaining power, but as an aid toward a fuller understanding of and communion with man, events, and things. Knowledge is not to be considered as a means of material prosperity and success, but as a call to serve and be responsible for others. Right? So it's not a utilitarian purpose in Catholic schools, it's greater than that. Miller similarly says, a Catholic school cannot be a factory for the learning of various skills and competencies, as good as those things are, nor is it for clients and consumers in a marketplace. As well, education is not a commodity, right? To equip graduates with enviable skills, even though Catholic schools do that. Rather, the Catholic school sets out to be a school for the human person and of human persons. So to that end, Catholic school teachers, right, as lay educators, in the spirit of Vatican II call for universal call to holiness, right? A lay educator has an undeniable professional aspect, but it cannot be reduced to professionalism alone. Professionalism is marked by and raised to a supernatural Christian vocation. Teachers' lifestyle and character are as important as their professional credentials. And this is bared out through Kilty's research, recent research, that in terms of principals who are doing the hiring, those who have a strong perceived personal religious formation and strong faith beliefs and spiritual practices will do their best in advancing schools' religious mission through spiritual leadership. And I think that ultimately also applies to teachers that they hire. Church, furthermore, teaches that educators, by extension, their universal call to holiness, are to fundamentally transform into a unique participation in the prophetic mission of Christ, carried on through one's teaching. Communication of truth and participation in Him who is the truth. Stout, in 2020, found that Catholic schools who are able to hold on to their identity and therefore subsequently not close, were authentically teaching the Catholic faith and through hiring as a priority, and that in their hiring, they hire excellent mission-focused faculty who are witnesses of faith and who are intellectually driven. Finally, few other aspects that really drive home what a Catholic educator is and how that's related to obviously hiring. Breslin found that there's a necessary linkage between the personal philosophy of the educator and the philosophy and mission of the institution. Those two things have to be linked. And the national standards and benchmarks for effective Catholic schools, elementary and secondary schools that is, echoing the National Directory of Catechesis, said you have to have teachers who can understand and accept the teachings of the Catholic Church and the moral demands of the gospel, and who can contribute to the achievement of the school's Catholic identity and apostolic goals, including participation in the school's commitment to social justice and evangelization. There's that word evangelization again, going back to the mission. So as not to belabor the points, I'm going to skip ahead here to summarize what's at stake here in terms of hiring for mission in Catholic schools, and then we'll get into what our project actually did. 2 summary quotes here for connecting hiring for mission and its importance in Catholic schools. Jacobs says, as Catholic educators become mindful of the divine call that is at the heart of their professional practice, they will then be able to concretize in even more explicit ways the mission for which they have devoted their lives as ministers of the gospel. Each day, they and their students will have a purpose for engaging the activities that are part of their school's life. People are more willing to listen to witnesses than to teachers, and if they do listen to teachers, it is because they are witnesses.
At this point, I would like to review our methodology and the results that we got from our survey. In our methodology, we incorporated an innovative research utilizing a mixed method approach. So we wanted to gather both qualitative and quantitative data. We constructed an electronic survey that we then disseminated to school administrators in 2 large archdioceses in the United States of America. The survey contents included the 10 best practices in hiring, which we identified from the literature. At this point, I'd like to just review what those 10 best practices are. The first is that schools' role in the evangelizing mission of the church is a strong consideration when hiring teacher candidates. The school's mission is the most important consideration when hiring teacher candidates. Asking teachers how their talents might contribute to supporting the mission. Considering how teachers will build the authentic Christian culture within your community. Our resources dedicated throughout the year to recruiting teacher candidates. Does the hiring process begin no later than March of the previous year? Are sample lessons delivered by teacher candidates wherever possible? Are current faculty referrals utilized by administrators? Are principals, administrators, and other networks that align with the mission of the school utilized in the recruiting process? And are teacher candidates' references checked at the time that they are to be hired? In addition, we derive from the literature 12 ideal candidate traits that we felt would be most appealing for teacher candidates. And at this point, I'd like to review what those 12 traits are. Communication skills, pedagogy, prior Catholic school experience, commitment to the Christian faith and morals, understanding Catholic traditions, personality, education and qualifications, supporting the school's mission, collaboration skills, ethical norms, appreciation of diversity, and the level of technological proficiency. In an effort to make it easier for our participants and to more succinctly identify the data, we decided to combine a couple of those traits that were very closely related so that we could establish 10 traits, and it just would make it easier for participants to rank those. And the traits that we felt were closely aligned were collaboration and communication skills. So those were put into one trait category. Also, prior experience teaching in Catholic schools and understanding the Catholic tradition were put into one trait category as well. Our survey was constructed using ranking style questions regarding best practices, and also rating style questions regarding beliefs about best practices. We asked participants to rank the statements regarding the ideal traits or characteristics of the candidates. we had open-ended questions so that we could gather some qualitative data. And we had follow-up interviews where we asked volunteers to give us their contact information, and then we met with them afterward to gather additional information to help in our research. Table 1 shows the results from the first section of the survey. Participants were asked to categorize their beliefs and priorities for hiring based on whether they strongly agreed, disagreed, or strongly disagreed with the 10 best hiring practices, which we had presented from the literature. Overall, most respondents either agreed or strongly agreed with most of these statements. In Table 2, participants were encouraged to evaluate their practices on their campuses in contrast to what they believed were the best hiring practices. Participants were asked to determine if these practices occurred on their campuses always, sometimes, often, or never. And overall, administrators agreed that they would always or often use most of these best practices that were identified in the survey. Table 3 talks about the specific traits and characteristics, the ideal characteristics that we derived from the literature to find out which one was the most coveted, or the one that administrators thought was the most important. They were asked to rank these individual traits or characteristics on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the least significant and 10 being the most desirable trait that the administrators would like a candidate to have. Overall, the most important traits were determined to be commitment to the Catholic faith and exemplifying Christian morals, and also supporting the mission and the culture. We move now to talking about the open-ended questions which followed these quantitative sections of the survey. The first question was, which trait from the above list is most important and why? So we asked them about those traits that we had just presented to them. And we asked them which did they think was the most important and why. The majority of our respondents agreed that supporting the school's mission and culture was the most important indicator for a teacher candidate. They felt that mission and culture was everything in the beginning and the end of the foundation of their institutions, noting that everything we do as a Catholic school stems from this foundation. The second question was, what are some of the major effective things done by administrators to hire the ideal candidate? What seemed to be most important to our administrators was getting to know the candidate. Also, a great emphasis was put on checking the references of candidates in the that came to them and they were considering hiring. The third question was, what professional networks do you use for recruiting? And the majority of our respondents indicated that they used the Archdiocesan resources to recruit candidates and when they were looking for teacher candidates. We also had follow-up interview questions where we asked volunteers to give us their contact information, and then we met with them later and presented these 3 questions. What role does the personal faith of the teacher candidate play in hiring decisions? How much faith formation must be conducted for non-Catholics? And what are the warning signs that a candidate is not a good fit for the organization? About half of the respondents believed that personal faith played a key role in hiring decisions, while another group felt that it did not play as such a major role in hiring decisions. They felt it was more important to hire the best teacher candidate. They apparently believed that their school culture would help to help candidates that may not be as strong in their mission or their Catholic faith. Most administrators interviewed have a regular faith formation program that they have for all faculty, including non-Catholics. And they indicated that this was how they helped with non-Catholics in their community. The final question about candidate fit revealed that all administrators at one point or another could see warning signs that individuals are not a good fit for the organization. At that point, they would need to do whatever they felt was necessary in order to rectify that situation.
Now I'm going to talk about a little bit of the implications and conclusions of our study. Some of the trends that came out of the survey of Catholic school administrators that we conducted are in front of you right here. It's about 5 trends. I'm going to go through each of them. Now, many of these trends really kind of confirm some of our hypothesis on how we thought schools might have responded. So you may be reading some of these and they may feel like they are kind of obvious answers, but it's important to to understand the truth of these statements backed in research, right? So our first trend here is that most schools agree on the value of hiring for mission. We found that the schools surveyed all felt that it was important to hire teaching candidates that fit their mission. Once again, that seems like that should be an obvious answer. But we see that there's not, that at least in the schools that we surveyed, that there's not a disconnect really in mission-based hiring practices and schools' values of those practices. We did see, however, that there was more consensus on what schools do in mission-based hiring than there is in general hiring practice. Now what that means is that we saw a trend in that how the type of things people do to determine whether a candidate is good for their mission. There was a lot of consensus that the best practices were actually best practices, and we saw a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit more variation in general hiring practices of what time of the year do you start your practices? Do you call back? Do you call references? Things of that nature. There's a little bit more on whether those type of things were as useful or done as often. Another trend that we saw was that the schools surveyed did do the things that they said they thought they were important, right? This is an important thing to note, right? If you're an administrator watching this presentation, and you might be saying to yourself, we always try to act on our beliefs and values, but this does tell us that there is not as much a gap in practice and beliefs, right? So it lets us kind of come up with ways and tools to help support mission-based hiring. One of the strongest trends we saw, and especially in the individual responses that Dr. Hess kind of described a little bit earlier, was that the school surveyed had leaders who had strong beliefs about mission, right? It seems like strong administrators, strong school leaders feel very strongly about their mission and the importance it maintains in the life of their school. Now, one of the more interesting trends we saw, and one of the more, I think, lively discussions we had, were that some of the schools surveyed valued school culture grounded in mission more than mission-based hiring. Now, what this means is that they felt that they could hire someone who had the capacity, right, to grow within the mission of the school, and that they trusted that their culture could get them there. Right, so some schools surveyed put more value on establishing their culture than they did on finding the perfect candidate in relation to their mission. If they had the teaching skills, and they think they could get them there with mission. Now, what are the implications? This is the big takeaways from it, right? We came up with kind of these 4 statements that perhaps you could use to guide you as you explore your own hiring practice, right? Number one, that there are obstacles to hiring permission that extend beyond just knowing what to do and thinking that it's important, right? There are financial obstacles to hiring permission, right? There are talent pool obstacles. There are cultural obstacles, right? There are things that extend beyond really the scope of our research, right? That's an important thing to acknowledge, that there are factors that exist that go beyond just knowing what to do and wanting to do the right thing. And biggest takeaway from this, in my opinion at least, is that school leadership is the determining factor in hiring permission. If your hiring team, if your principal, if your president, if your board thinks that it is important to hire permission, it's going to happen. If they don't, it's not going to happen. Right? School leadership is the determining factor in hiring permission. And then another kind of obvious implication here, right, is that following best practices works. Lastly here is that culture and hiring are reciprocal, right? There's a relationship between the school culture that you create and the people you hire, right? Now, initially, we saw, you may think of those things as opposing, or not as opposing, but you may see culture and hiring as one or the other. You either have a strong culture and it doesn't matter who you hire, right? Or you hire the right people and they establish the culture. But they're reciprocal, right? If you have a strong culture, then you're going to hire people that fit that culture, which is in itself a kind of hiring permission. And if you hire the right people, they're going to create the kind of culture that allows you to hire more people that fit that culture, right? So it's as an administrator, as a school leader, it is important to view your culture and your hiring practices in that reciprocal relationship. And that's the end of our presentation. I hope that everybody who viewed this got a little bit out of it. I hope we didn't bore you too much. I hope you learned a little bit. We are providing a little bit of handouts. I think particularly what I hope will be the most useful to you guys is maybe the list of best practices that we have as an attachment available to you. Thank you all, and God bless.